Hello coders, in this tutorial I'm going to be teaching you how to create a bash script to automatically build a Laravel API application. I'm then going to demonstrate how to host this on a Cloudways AWS virtual private server and then how to run the script via SSH. This is our Laravel application that I created in a previous tutorial. I'll leave a link to both the GitHub repository as well as the tutorial demonstrating how I built this Laravel API. Now, to build this Laravel application from the ground up, we have to supply a series of commands. The commands that we have to run will pull down the latest code, build the database, we need to install the Composer packages, we need to handle any assets, and we need to migrate the database. As this build process requires a developer to run these commands manually, there is a high risk of human error. Imagine, if you will, that a developer publishes the assets before pulling down any updated packages and then getting their assets out of order. Or imagine that the developer doesn't actually pull the latest changes until the very last command. And as this process is repeatable and requires the same order, what we can do is build an automated process that all we have to do is run a single command and then all of these commands get ran. This is what I'm going to be demonstrating next. The first thing we need to do is create a file. This is going to have our shell script. We're going to call this build.sh. To create the file in the root directory, type touch and then build.sh. The first thing that we need to include in the build.sh file is what's called a shebang. A shebang is a sequence of characters which tells the operating system how to interpret and run the commands within the script. The shebang starts with a hash symbol, and the next character within the shebang is the exclamation mark. After these two characters, we need to supply the full path to the interpreter that we wish to use. And in this case, we want to use bash. The path that we're going to use is /bin/bash. The first thing that I'm going to do is actually echo out a string to the terminal. And this is going to tell us that this command is running. I'm going to type echo and then within double quotes, I'm going to type running deploy script. There are 5 commands that we want to run. And so what I'm going to do is echo out a string for each one of those commands. The first one I'm going to write is echo and then within square brackets 1/5. So we know that we're on the first out of 5 commands and then the string pulling from GitHub. On the next line, we need to supply the command that we wish to run. In this case, it is git pull origin. We're now going to create another string and we're going to say creating database if one isn't found. And underneath this string, we're going to supply the command touch database/database.sqlite. The third command that we want to run is, of course, installing the packages from Composer. So I'm going to echo out the string 3/5 installing packages using Composer. Underneath this, we're going to supply the command composer install. The fourth command will be to publish the API platform assets. Echo out another string that says 4/5 publishing API platform assets. Supply the command php artisan API-platform : assets. The fifth and final step is to deal with any database migration changes. Type echo 5/5 migrating database. And underneath this, type php artisan migrate. And I'm going to give this the argument --force because this means that we're going to migrate the database without any interaction. The last thing we're going to include in the build script is an echo with the string the app has been built. We have now created our build script, and when the developer runs this script, they'll be confident to know that all of the commands are in a predefined order. Let's try and run this build script from the terminal. Type ./build build.sh. Press enter. You're going to get an error similar to this. Because I'm using Z shell, it says ZSH permission denied, but you may be using a different shell yourself. This means that we don't actually have executable rights to this script. If we type ls-al, we should see the build script in the output. The file permissions set on the build.sh file do not include executable rights. Compare this one to the artisan file, where we have executable rights for both the other, the group, and the user. Type sudo and then chmod plus x and then build.sh. Chmod is going to change the user permissions against the build.sh file. In this case, we're supplying the arguments plus an x. This means that we're going to add executable rights to this file. Press enter and you may get asked to supply your password because we are using sudo. To run the build script, type ./build.sh. And here we can see that the build script is running in the predetermined order that we've laid out in the script. This means that whenever a developer wants to build this application, all they need to do now is run this build script, and they will know that this script runs these commands in the order that is defined. Now we've created our build script, I'm going to demonstrate how to deploy this site on a Cloudways VPS. After that, I'm then going to demonstrate how to run this build script via SSH. The first thing we need to do is create our Cloudways VPS. In the Cloudways dashboard, we need to click Add Server. From here, we need to select the application that we want to create. I'm going to create a custom PHP app. We also need to add the application name. I'm going to type book-app-2. For the server name, I'm going to supply demo2. And I've already got a project, which is the book-app project selected. We're going to choose AWS in this case, and I'm going to bring it down to small as the server size. Let's click Launch Now. And here we have a list of our servers. The Demo2 server of AWS is currently provisioning. Our server is now ready. What we need to do is modify the application settings. To do that, click into Applications. Click on the application and then click into Application Settings. The first thing I would like to do is change our web root. I want to include public, as we are using our Laravel application that requires a public folder with the index.php file within it. Once you've done that, click on the tick button. The next setting that I would like to change is the PHP version. Go over to the servers, click on the Demo2 server, and then Settings and Packages. From here, click on the Packages tab. The server is currently running PHP 8.1, but this Laravel application requires at least PHP 8.2. To change the version of PHP, click on the Modify button and then select PHP 8.3. As we're changing a package on the server, we get this warning. Read that, and then when you're happy, press continue. Our AWS VPS is now ready, and we can now deploy our application. There are many ways to deploy a Laravel application to a VPS server. In a previous tutorial, I demonstrated how to use the Cloudways dashboard to run a deployment via Git. In this tutorial, I'm going to do something quite different. We're actually going to SSH onto our VPS, and then I'm going to access Git via the command line. This will allow us to run our build script. The first thing we need to do is access our VPS via SSH, and that is what I'm going to be demonstrating next. In the Cloudways website, we want to access the master credentials from our server. Here we can see that we have the public IP, the username and password used when SSHing onto the VPS. To connect to our VPS over SSH, we need to give the SSH command the username that was shown in Cloudways. After the username, we add an @ symbol. And after the @ symbol, we supply the public IP address that was shown in Cloudways. After you press enter, you'll be asked if you want to continue. Type yes and then press enter. Enter your password and press enter. We are now in our VPS via the command line. Access the public underscore HTML directory by typing cd applications and then the application name public underscore HTML. This folder needs to be completely empty because what we're going to do is pull down the repository from GitHub. The first thing we need to do is check the contents of this folder. Type ls. In this folder, I have an index.php file. This needs to be removed. Type rm index.php. Now that the public underscore HTML folder is empty, we can clone our repository from GitHub. Head over to GitHub and go to how to code well Laravel-book-API. Click on the green code button and copy the SSH address. Go back to the terminal and type git clone and paste the address. Press enter and we'll be asked to verify whether we want to continue. Type yes and then enter. Here we can see a permission denied error. This is because we need to create an SSH key on this VPS that allows access to GitHub. To do that, type ssh-keygen-t RSA. Press enter. It's going to ask us where we want to keep this key, and the current path of home master.ssh id underscore RSA is perfectly fine. Press enter. If we wanted to, we could supply a passphrase, but in this case, I'm just going to leave that blank. Press enter. It's then going to ask us to enter the same password again. As that was blank, I'm going to press enter. We now have a public key that we can supply to GitHub. The public key is stored in home/master/.sh/id underscore RSA .pub. To see the key, type cat and paste the path. We need to copy this key and head over to GitHub. We need to supply GitHub with this key, and we're going to do so as a deployment key to this repository. Click on Settings and then scroll down to Deploy Keys. Click Add Key and then paste the key in the key text area. Give the key a title and I'm going to call this Cloudways. Unless you want to alter the code, don't select Allow Write Access. Click on Add Key. Now let's go back to the terminal. We can now clone the GitHub repository, and we do this by typing git clone. We pass the repository address and then the destination in which we want to clone this repository to. And in this case, we're going to add a dot because this is saying clone that repository to the current working directory, which is the public underscore HTML directory. Press enter and we can see that the code has now been cloned. If you type ls-al, you should see all of the files from our application. And notice we have our build.sh file. Before we run our build.sh file, we need to configure Git. The first thing I'm going to do is type git and then pull, press enter, and we're going to get this error. It's saying that we've detected a dubious ownership of the repository. We need to tell Git that this is a safe directory. To do that, copy the command that has been supplied. Paste the command and press enter. This is telling Git that the directory that we're currently in is safe. Let's run git pull once more. And now we get this warning. This is Git asking us how it should be configured to handle pulling changes from the repository. We've got three options. We could either do git pull with the rebase of false, this is a merge, or we could do a rebase of true, and that would rebase the code, or we could choose to do a fast forward only. For this, I'm going to use rebase of false. This means that we're going to merge our changes. Paste the config in and press enter. Let's try doing a git pull again. We get the output already up to date. This means that we can now use git pull in our build.sh file. To run the build script, type ./build. And here we can see it's running our build commands. Let's scroll right to the top. The first thing it's doing is pulling from GitHub. The output is already up to date. That's what we've already seen. And now it's creating the database file if one isn't found. And then it's running the Composer packages using Composer. Scroll down past all of this output. The fourth process is publishing the platform assets. And finally, it migrates the database. This means that the application has now been built on our AWS VPS. Let's get back into the browser and get the URL from the Cloudways dashboard. From Cloudways, we want to get to the application. Click on book-app-2. In the access details page, you'll see the application URL. Click on that URL. Add /API, and you'll see that we have our Books API application. We've now successfully built our application using the build script that we've created. There is still an element of human error that we can remove, and that is when a developer needs to build this application, they have to SSH onto the VPS and then change their working directories to this public_HTML folder and then run the build.sh file. To remove this element of human error, what I'm going to do next is run this in an SSH script, and that is what I'm going to be demonstrating next. Let's type exit to come out of our server. What I'm going to demonstrate now is how to run a command after we've logged in using SSH. To do this, type SSH, pass in your username, and then and then the IP address. After that, add a space, and then add 2 single quotes. Within these quotes is going to be a command that we want to issue to the server. Type pwd. This is going to print the working directory. Enter your password, and now we've got the output of the pwd command within the SSH tunnel. And the current working directory is /mnt/data/home/master. Let's do that again, but instead of pwd, let's type ls-al. Press enter again and enter your password. The output that is given shows us the contents of the home directory, and notice the applications folder is actually a symlink into home/ and then a number.cloudwaysapps.com. In order to run the build script via the SSH tunnel, what we need to do is change our working directory before we run the script, because as we can see here, this is the current directory that we tunnel into. To do that, remove the ls-al command and type cd to change the directory, passing in the path to our public_HTML directory. This path will be /home/master/applications. Next, we want to pass in the application name, which is the random folder name that Cloudways gives our application. And then after that, type in public_HTML. To ensure that this is correct, add a space and then type and to run another command, and this command will be ls-al. Press enter and supply your password. And here we can see that we have our application. These are all the files for our API. This is our build.sh file that we need to run. Press up on the terminal to get back to our previous command. Remove the ls-al command, but keep the $. Now we need to run our build.sh command, and we do this using // and then type build.sh. Press enter and supply your password. And here we can see the output of our build.sh file. This is building the application through the SSH tunnel. We've now successfully built our Laravel API using the build script and via an SSH tunnel. There are a couple of things that we could do to limit the number of steps even further. We could, for instance, create our own SSH key, which is passwordless, and we could also create an alias to this command so we don't have to type the full thing out each time. But perhaps they're for future tutorials. So why did I use Cloudways for this project? Well, I wanted to create a managed virtual private server. A managed server means that I don't actually manage the server myself. That's up to Cloudways, which means that I have more time to actually build and develop the application rather than tinker around and configure the server itself. If you would like to use Cloudways for your next project, please do consider the discounted link in the show notes below. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again in the next tutorial.